You don't want your upper body to be like a noodle and flimsy. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome to episode 4 of my Powerlifting Basics series. In this episode, I'll be showing you guys how to squat like a powerlifter. I'll be going over stuff like setup, positioning, breathing, execution, cues, and basically everything you need to know to squat with good form. I just want to say before we start, first of all, I don't have any licenses in coaching and that kind of stuff. This is based off of a ton of research from credible sources, advice from my coach, and my 2.5 years of powerlifting experience. If you want to know how I got into powerlifting, you can watch my 2-year powerlifting journey up here or in the description box below. And also, as I mentioned several times in this video, this is how I perform the squat, but someone with a different anatomy will squat very differently from me. For example, I have very long femurs, so there's a lot of things I have to do to compensate for that, while someone with short femurs will have a totally different squat from my squat. So it is important to find what works for you specifically. Thus, as I said in episode 1 of how you can start powerlifting, it's very important to watch a variety of people lift because everyone is built differently. So next, I'm just gonna go over equipment really quickly. So when I squat, I use my belt, my wrist wraps, my knee sleeves, and my shoes. I will be talking about my belt and my wrist wraps later when I talk about that section, but knee sleeves keeps your knees warm and prevents you from having knee injuries. And if they're tight enough, they can give you a bounce at the bottom of your squat. Also, shoes are really important for squats. So I wear an elevated heeled shoe. It's the Nike Run Legos 4, but any shoe that has a flat sole would work. So anything like Converse or Vans or any weightlifting shoes are really good. So don't wear running shoes, tennis shoes, or any shoes that have a cushion at the bottom, because when you squat, you want to be standing on firm ground and not on a cushion. If you want to know more about shoes and what type of shoes to wear, you can check out this video where I go into more detail of what shoe you should wear when you squat. Lastly, before you start, make sure to warm up properly before putting the heavy weight on your body. If you want to see how you should warm up, you can watch episode 3 of my Powerlifting Basics series. I'll link it up here and in the description box below. You should definitely warm up before lifting. Okay, so next about safety and setup. So first of all, before you squat, make sure you know how you're gonna dump the weight. So what I mean by dumping the weight is if you can't get the lift up, what would you do? So most people would have a spotter, but unless if you're in a powerlifting gym, I would not rely on spotters because you don't know if the people in the gym know how to spot properly. So I would recommend having safety bars on the side. So set the safety bars so they're a few inches below the most bottom position you will hit with the bar when you squat. So if you do fail the weight, you could just squat down even lower and the bar will be on the rack instead of being on you. Another way to dump the weight if you don't have safety rails is to throw the weight behind you and jump forward. You're at the bottom of the squat and you can't get it up. So you let go with your hands and let the bar go behind you and make sure to jump forward and not hold on to the bars. So letting go with your hands is really important when you do this. Unfortunately, I don't have a video to demonstrate, but hopefully you can get the idea. Just let go with your hands, jump forward, and the bar will be behind you. Next, for setting up the rack. First of all, it's ideal to face away from mirrors and away from walls. So at my commercial gym, 2 of the squat racks face a mirror, which is really distracting and you don't want to do that, especially if you compete. And when you compete, you will be competing in open space, so you don't want to practice squatting in front of a mirror. So we have another rack at our gym. It's a power rack, and you can take the part where it holds the bar and move it to the other side so you face outwards instead of facing inward. Next, you want to set that height where the bar is around at your upper chest position. And when you get under the bar, it should be really easy to lift off. You're not doing too much torque, but you're not getting on your tippy toes. Next, we're gonna get into the setup of the squat. So the setup is super important. You should develop a routine that you can repeat every single time when you approach the bar, and it should be something ingrained in you. So find something that works best for you and repeat that every single time. So first of all, let's talk about grip width of the bar. I like to grip close enough that my back is tight, but not the closest that I can grip because I don't want to be stretching my shoulders while I'm squatting. So close enough that I can create a shelf on my back, but not so close that it's uncomfortable. However, there is no right or wrong way to do it. Most importantly, you want your back to be as tight as possible and your scapulas to be retracted. So my routine is to grip your hands first, look at the knurling of the bar, and make sure you're gripping at the same position. And then I put my head under and slide my back under and feeling like I'm doing a lat pull down. And I slide down lower than my actual position and slowly move it up until it slides into my rack position. Also, I do a thumb over grip because that reduces the stress I put on my elbows and my wrists, and also allows me to grip narrower so I have a tighter back. This is where wrist wraps come in. They help stabilize my wrists and make sure they're straight. And a lot of people who try out a thumb over grip will say that it feels like the bar is slipping, but that is because they don't have enough of forward lean. And also, you should not be placing the bar on your wrist. The bar should be 100% on your back. Either way, if you wear wrist wraps or not, or if you do thumb under or thumb over grip, make sure your wrists are in line with your elbows. Next, we're going to talk about finding your stance. So foot width and foot angle. I find a foot width of slightly wider than my shoulder width and a 35-degree foot angle to work best for me. So for foot angle, there's a test that you can do. Stand on a slippery-ish surface with socks and point your toes forward. Next, you squeeze your glutes super tight and allow your foot to rotate out. So don't plant your toes on the ground, just your heels. When you squeeze your glute the most and where your foot stops rotating, this should be the foot angle where you can engage your glutes the most. And your glutes are the largest muscle on your body, so it's really important to make sure to use these when you are squatting. If this test doesn't work for you, you can just play around with the foot angle and make sure it's a foot angle where you can feel like your hips are open and you can engage your glutes. Next, for finding your stance. Find a stance where you can reach depth easily and comfortably, have an open hip, and not a lot of knee caving on the way up. So you don't want to be standing so wide that every single time you come up when you squat, your knees go inside a lot. And also, you don't want to be standing so close that you're only using your quads and not using your hips when you squat. Play around with different stances between sets and find what is most comfortable for you. Next, we're gonna go over bar positioning. So your back is basically a shelf for the bar. There's two types of bar positioning, high bar and low bar. High bar is where the bar is on your traps and you have a more vertical body and a more upright torso. Low bar, which is what I do, is where you place the bar on your rear delts and you have a more forward lean to keep the bar mid-foot. And most people are stronger when they low bar. That is because it reduces the torque on your hip. However, most people do start out as high bar. That's what I started with, and it took a few months to find my perfect low bar position. So as a beginner, I would recommend playing around with both and practicing both, but the main goal is to keep the bar mid-foot. Next, we're going to talk about unrack and bracing. First of all, you want to approach the bar with confidence. You want to face the bar, grip it with your hands first, pull yourself under, and find that shelf positioning, whether it is high bar or low bar. If you don't have a lot of muscle on your back, you can create a shelf by having a narrower grip and kind of squeezing your back together. That's what you do to create that shelf. Find that shelf positioning. Place your feet directly under the bar, not behind and not in front. Make sure you have a tight core. Squeeze your glutes to unrack the bar. Don't try to squat the bar up or use your knees too much. All you want to think about is squeezing your glutes, and that should unrack the bar. Next, let the weight settle until it doesn't move anymore before you move back. And next, we have the walkout. So you want to have an efficient routine where you're not doing too much, because you don't want to be wasting energy here when you can be using that energy for actually lifting the bar. So I take a 3-step walkout. I take 1 step back and then another step back with my other foot, and then lastly I adjust left or right to find your stance. Also, I just want to say that if you end up with a foot in front of another foot, so you're in a different plane, it is still fine. You can still squat. Just make sure to look at a different spot than where you would usually look. You don't want to take extra steps when you could just look a different place and pretend that you are in a different plane. And throughout the whole squat, and especially during the walkout, make sure to feel like the bar is a part of you. And to do that, allow a natural forward lean, especially for low bar. A lot of people focus on standing up too straight, and it's kind of impossible to stand up exactly straight when the bar is behind you. So allow a natural forward lean, and that is really going to help you with the execution and with feeling the weight being as a part of you when you squat. And lastly, let your elbows be mostly in line with your torso. You don't want your elbows to be forward or too much backwards. A little bit behind your torso is fine, especially if you have limited shoulder mobility, but mostly in line with your torso. Next, I'm going to talk about where to look. You should look 6 to 10 feet on the ground in front of you. So when I squat in my garage, I like to look at where the garage door meets the floor. And wherever you pick to look at, it is important to pick one place because you don't want your eyes wandering, and that can be distracting. Lastly, you want a neutral spine. So you don't want any anterior pelvic tilt or posterior pelvic tilt. A little bit is fine, but it has to be natural. So you don't want to stick your butt out and have an anterior pelvic tilt when you squat. So to fix that, I like to think of engaging your core and thinking of ribs down. So you're putting your ribs down instead of arching your back. So finally, we are at the movement itself. First of all, breathing is so important because when you breathe in, you create intra-abdominal pressure, and your abdominal wall is what stabilizes your upper body. You don't want your upper body to be like a noodle and flimsy. You want your upper body to be super tight. And this is where your belt comes in. So your belt can increase intra-abdominal pressure because you are pushing against a belt. So you want to take a deep breath at the top of your squat, create that intra-abdominal pressure, start the rep, finish the rep, and then breathe out after you have locked out. You do not want to breathe in on the way down and breathe out on the way up. That is totally wrong. Breathe only when you're at the top. You don't want to be breathing during the lift. Next, when you start the lift, you want to break at the knees and the hips simultaneously. One analogy I like to think about is to feel like there's one string pulling your butt back and one string pulling your knees forward. Also, as I said before, allow a forward lean, especially for low bar. Keeping your body upright for too much is not good. Too many people try to bend their knees first. It is actually better to break more at the hips than at the knees first. So break at the same time, but move your hips a little faster than your knees. Next, you want to control the descent of the squat. Maintain tension throughout the descent. Think of bringing your knees up towards your chest, and that allows you to engage all your muscles in your hip and legs and allow to hit depth easier. You have to be precise with the movement and make sure you are the one in control and not the bar having control over you. Go slow enough that I can maintain tension and be in control of the bar when I'm going down. However, you don't want to go so slow that you're wasting energy. So it's good to find the perfect median between those and control the bar, but try not to waste your energy. Your toes and your heels should be planted throughout the whole lift. Think of your foot as a tripod and feel like your toes are grabbing the floor, and think of screwing your feet into the ground. You do not want your heels or your toes to be coming off during the lift, and you also don't want them to be moving. Next, we're going to talk about bar path. You want the center of gravity of you and the bar to be in a straight line up and down. And as I said before, if you're lifting really light, the center of gravity might not be on the bar, so it is harder to keep the bar straight up and down when you're lifting light weights. But as you get heavier, the center of mass will be on the bar, and that's when you can really see the straight bar path. Also, this goes in with the forward lean. Because I have very long femurs, I have to lean forward more than others to keep my bar mid-foot. So do not be afraid of leaning forward when you're squatting. Next, you want to hit depth, which is the crease of your hip has to be lower than the top of your knee, especially if you're going to competitions. This is the part where you want to hit, and also this is the depth where you get the most muscle activation. So if you're doing a squat, make sure to hit depth so you can really get everything out of the squat. So at the very bottom of your squat, below 90 degrees, your abductors turn on. So that's why you might see my knees go out a tiny bit and my knees go in a little, which is totally safe if there's not a lot of knee movement. The only major reason why knee caving is not good is because you're losing energy. If your body is using energy to move your knees left or right, then you're wasting that energy that could have been used to push yourself up. So you want to limit knee caving as much as you can, and how I do this is I make sure my knees track mostly on top of my toes. A lot of people think of knees out, and I think that is also a waste of energy because actually it is harder to push your knees out than letting your knees cave in. So instead, I like to think of putting your knees forward and straight up, not out and not in, to keep my knees mostly on top of my toes. So you want your hips and your knees to rise at the same time. You don't want to be doing a good morning squat where your hips rise excessively at first and then your knees rise. So what I like to think of is to drive your whole foot down into the ground. So think of pushing your feet into the ground and think of pushing your upper back into the bar. Instead of just thinking about squatting the bar up, Also, you want to think of explosiveness and exploding out of the bottom of the squat. Lastly, when you reach the top, do not hyperextend and over squeeze your glutes. All you have to do is make sure to lock out your knees. You don't want to squeeze so much that you don't have a forward lean anymore. Also, I just want to say that your knees can pass your toes because this totally depends on where you put the bar and your femur length. This is me squatting without letting my knees pass my toes, and first of all, I can't reach depth, my back is getting rounded, and everything is just bad, and also the bar is not over mid-foot. Everything just looks horrible. And if I allow my knees to pass my toes, then everything is literally fixed. Some people do squat with their knees not passing their toes, and that is because they have short femurs. So that's why you should not copy someone's form because everybody is built different. For me, my knees pass my toes a lot because my femurs are super long. This is still totally safe. All you want is the bar to be mid-foot and you will be fine that way. So when you're done with the squat and you want to rack the bar, you take 2 steps forward and drop the bar in. If you took too many steps backwards, then you might have to take more steps forwards, which is a lot of energy, especially if you've done a really hard set of squats and you don't have any more energy to rack the bar. So don't walk too far back and try to only take 2 steps forward and let the bar drop in. I like to rest between 3 to 5 minutes depending on how intense the set is. I think it's better to rest 5 minutes and be able to complete the number of reps at whatever weight and RPE than resting only 3 minutes and having the next set be very, very hard. However, I don't think you should rest more than 5 minutes unless if you're going for a PR and going for really high intensities. And lastly, don't forget to unrack your weights and put the weights away. And yeah, so that is basically it for squatting. If you guys have any questions about anything I mentioned, please leave them in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video and learned some stuff, make sure to like the video. And if you want, you can subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week.